YouTube. What's up, man? It's your boy Richardson from Minimum Wage to Millionaire. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here, welcome back. Listen, guys, just wanted to make this video, quick video. Well, I always say quick video, but it ends up being long. And it's a video about a topic that really has always been a thing in like the financial YouTube or just the financial realm, and that is the prospect of home buying versus renting. And generally speaking, in the financial realm, you'll oftentimes hear that home buying is always better than renting. But I'm going to be kind of the contrarian today, and I'm going to push back on that. Not necessarily saying that home buying is bad or anything, but to just emphasize, I guess, the benefits of renting, and that I genuinely don't believe that renting is a waste of money. So I guess just to answer the question outright, do I think renting is a waste of money? No. Do I think home buying is always better than renting? Oh, sorry, guys. Do I always believe that home buying is better than renting? No. So just to answer those questions off the bat, for those people that just kind of want to hear my answer, but for people that want to kind of understand why I believe that, stick tuned to this video. So the first thing I want to just establish is what really is the difference between home buying and renting? Well, you know, kind of the names kind of say it, but just to kind of like break it down, home buying, right, is the idea of, you know, generally going out there, owning the property, either if you could afford it in cash or some type of mortgage that you'll take out from a mortgage lender or a bank or whatever. And sorry, guys. And what generally happens is that you'll make your payments, you'll clear off the mortgage. Usually it's 15 to 30 years, right? Depending on the terms that the lender will pre-approve you for or the terms that you want. And once you pay off the home, you technically own the home, right? You own the home outright. The reason why I say technically is that you do own the home, but there's still cost to home ownership that will always be there, and I'll expand on that a little bit further. Whereas with renting, when you're renting, you obviously, you know, in exchange of monthly rent, you are leasing an area that is owned by someone else, right? So it could be, an apartment, townhouse, whatever, even a house, right? If you want to rent a house, but you know off the bat that you don't own it. You're just leasing the space there, usually tied by a lease or an agreement, and usually the leases will be like 12 months of a year lease. So in exchange, you have to pay them for 12 months, and then once the lease is up, you could choose to either leave or you can renew it or negotiate the terms, right? So I just wanted to break that in to tell you guys what's the difference. Now, one of the common, I guess you could say, things when people talk about home buying and renting, and it's usually at the disservice of renting, is the idea that, well, when you're renting, you're throwing money away because you're not building equity. This is 100% true. When you're renting, you don't own the property, right? So you are, in some ways, not building equity, right? Which may give the impression that you're throwing money away. But again, like I mentioned in the beginning, you are giving the monthly rent not to build equity, to own anything. It's just to lease the space. So if that is your mindset from the beginning, which I would hope people that are renting, that's kind of your mindset. Like, you're not thinking, okay, I'm going to pay all this rent for months, if not years, if not decades, and I'm going to somehow maybe get this mindset that I'm going to own something. No, you know off the bat you're not owning anything. You're just leasing this space. So if you know this off the bat, I don't know how that necessarily is you wasting money, because you know you're not owning any equity, right? And then two is that the question then becomes is that, okay, well, just because you don't own something, does that then mean it's inherently a waste of money? If, let's say, for example, you were to go to a laundromat, let's say you didn't own your own washer and dryer, whether it's because you can't afford it or you don't want to, or you don't have enough space, or maybe the ongoing cost of washing and drying it would be too expensive. So you go to a laundromat, you know off the bat that the washer machine and the dryer machines are not yours. You know that you don't own it. You know that the laundromat is not yours. But if you get something out of the utility out of it, which in this case is washing and drying your clothes, and you're willing to pay the price for that, meaning you're okay, you're comfortable with the price that they're asking you to pay to do that, and you're okay with the service, then would that still be a waste of money? I would argue no, because you're using the service. So when I hear people oftentimes jump to the renting is a waste of money because you're not building equity, I sit there and I wonder, well, is your intentions to build equity? If that's the case, then home buying will always be better. But I would then argue that investing is more your priority, which is not necessarily tied to where you live, right? Investments could be anything, right? Gold, silver, real estate, stocks. So if your goal is to build equity, those will be clearly better paths. But if you're just going there to utilize shelter, to afford shelter, which shelter is not free, right? There's a cost for someone to provide shelter. Either you buying your own shelter, the property, or somebody giving to you, there's a cost associated with it. So by definition, renting can't be a waste of money, at least in my opinion. Feel free to interject in the comments if you guys agree or disagree with me. But the second thing I wanted to know is that when it comes to home buying, that typically people kind of jump to is this idea that, well, when you're home buying, you'll always have a place to live. Yes and no, right? Yes, you'll always have a place to live, being that if you want to remain in that area and stay there forever, absolutely, you always have a place to live. But if by any chance you want to sell out of the property, and we see home buyers having home buyer's remorse. They buy properties in areas, something happens, maybe the crime spikes, maybe for political reasons, maybe for personal reasons in their life, they have to move. I think most of us could agree that turning over your lease or canceling your lease early on your apartment that you're renting is a lot more of an easy process than selling a home. There's people that put their homes on the market for months, if not years, to sell, and they can't sell because it depends on the market. It depends on what price they put, maybe the real estate agent to work with, but it also depends on the total market forces. If we're in an environment where there's not a lot of demand of buying homes, and you're a seller that's trying to sell and offload your home, guess what? Unless you're cutting your prices by 20, 30, 40%, which may not make sense economically and financially for you, you got to just sit there and wait, right? So that's one of those things where renting comes into play, because if you're ever in a situation where you need to kind of turn over and leave as soon as possible, renting will always be better in that regard, right? Now, again, if your goal is stability and I want to remain here and I want to plant my roots and, sow the seed and build something for my family here for the rest of my life, or as long as I possibly can, then it may make sense in that regard. But if you like that flexibility of, hey, I don't like this area, I don't like this here, you will find that renting will serve you better, right? And some people have this assumption that it only applies to younger people who are in their careers and they're trying to just do opportunities. I don't think that's the case as well. Again, like I mentioned, it could be a spike in crime. If crime is going up, properties values are going down, you're trying to sell your house versus, lease is up. Yeah, I got 3 months left on the lease, but look, I heard gunshots, two units be or down the street. I'm not staying here. You're going to know that process is a lot more easier when you're renting than if you're buying. And I think a lot of people tend to underestimate the flexibility that brings. Another thing I want to kind of touch upon when it comes to home buying and renting is the immediate assumption that home buying will always be cheaper than renting. No, because even if you take your mortgage payment, let's just say in this analogy, your mortgage payment is $2,000 a month. Cool. Your rent is $2,000 a month. You may get the impression, well, I'd rather own something for $2,000. But that only makes sense if the $2,000 is the maximum you're going to home ownership. And again, if you don't believe me, ask any homeowner. You're not just paying $2,000 a month for your home, right? And if you are, and that's your only cost, you're either very fortunate or you're deliberately not factoring in the other things that come into play. Like I mentioned earlier, with property taxes, homeowners insurance, right? Maintenance, right? Because eventually things will repair. And unlike renting, where that burden falls on the property manager / landlord, that responsibility falls on you. So if you're not someone that likes to get your hands dirty, you're not someone that likes to kind of tool things yourself and stuff like that, home ownership is going to be a very tough challenge. And some people think, well, I'll just buy a new or build home. Okay. I mean, hey, if it works, it works. But I would just argue that the quality of the homes being built today, new builds, are not like the same new built qualities of the 30s of 30, 40, 50 years ago. You know, I think most of us could agree. Some of these houses are like cookie cutter in terms of the quality that's being built. And it could be one of plethora of reasons why that's the case, but I don't want to sidetrack this and go on a whole tangent with that. So, and these are what's called hidden costs of owning homes. People don't factor these in. So they'll look at the mortgage and rent. They're equal. I'm going to just go with the mortgage. But when your AC is down, and I know the reason I'm saying this is that, I still live with my parents, and currently our ACs are having some issues, and we're looking at probably a couple $100, if not $1,000, to get all those parts and things fixed and repaired. And that's just something that you're going to have to accept when you're a homeowner. Things will break down, and you have to be willing not only to save for it, but to plan around your budget for that. Because if you're not, and you got, a $1,000 AC repair that comes out of nowhere, that for a lot of households is going to throw your whole budget off, right? Whereas with renting, you never have to factor that in, right? Because that, at least with HVAC and electrical and plumbing, that's on the landlord. You just call the landlord. Now, granted, there's some landlords that are more on top of things than others, but in theory, the landlords bears that responsibility. And if not, you could call, the state's, I don't know what department it would be for housing and stuff. You could call them that, and, sometimes that enough could put a little pressure on that. So that's it. I don't want to ramble on too long. I just wanted to kind of give you guys a different perspective on the idea that home buying is always better than renting, which again, I don't agree with. I think there are times and situations where renting is better if you're someone that's maybe younger and want flexibility, or if you're someone that, you like to have, I guess, less stress about the maintenance and upkeep. Or if you're someone that wants to live in an area that typically home buying is a lot more expensive, but renting is relatively cheaper, renting may make sense for you. And I'm just trying to tell people is that don't write off renting just because society or the common financial wisdom is home buying is better. Because I think that may lead you to a lot of trouble if you don't prepare and plan for it. Not to say home buying is bad. It's clearly not. And it makes sense for a lot of people. But just make sure you do your homework and you read the room before you jump into that commitment. So that's it, guys. I'm actually about to go in to do what I have to do. It's Richardson from Minimum Wage to Millionaire. May the Lord be with you guys today. Have a good one.